Hi, I'm Laura with Link Private Tutoring, and we are here today with Allison Dillard. Allison is a math professor. She's actually the author of two books, Crush Math Now and Raise Your Math Grade. They're amazing. She's helps people by having a parenting membership. She helps parents to help their kids with math, and that's one of the things that we're going to talk to today, to talk with her about today, specifically about math anxiety. And once you've heard her today, you're going to want to hear more. She's got an upcoming math podcast, and she also is a math tutor, and she can help out with virtual math pods. I know a lot of people are deciding to homeschool, so you can find some really good information about helping your students with math. Allison, welcome. I'm glad to talk to you this morning.
Hi, Laura. It's so good to talk to you.
It's good to talk to you too. So I am an ACT tutor and specifically, but I'm also a high school teacher, and I hear a lot when I ask students, what part of the ACT is the part you're most worried about? And a lot of them say math. I imagine you hear that as well.
Oh, absolutely.
Yes, and some people just start with this math anxiety. So let's talk a little bit to the parents at first. What can you tell parents when they're dealing with a student who has math anxiety and either they don't want to do their homework or they're stuck? How can the parents help students push through that and develop maybe a love of math?
I think the most important thing that parents can do, because parents don't necessarily need to love math or know how to do the math. Sorry, it's my coffee maker going off in the background. Parents don't necessarily need to know the math in order to help their kids with it, because what they can do is they can really help their kids with the mindset to sort of figure out math, and so simply by, I think the problem with students with math anxiety is they always say, oh, I'm not a math person and I'm not good at math, and oh, I can't do this, it's too hard, I'll never figure it out. Other people are just sort of naturally math people and they get it, but I don't. And so as a parent, what you can do is just remind them that math is just a skill, right? Just like learning how to play soccer or the piano or or anything really. And like all skills, you improve with effort, so instead of sympathizing with them and saying, oh, I know you're bad at math, it's okay, I am too. Instead, if you just say, remember, math is a skill, just get back to your homework and keep on practicing and you will improve. I think that's honestly, if they can hear that at school, if they can hear that at home in addition to at school, that can make such a huge difference.
That makes so much sense because I have learned things even as an adult that I didn't think I was good at. But if I slow down and break it apart, like learning how to cook or learning how
Hmm.
to sew, it's a
Yes.
skill if you
Hmm.
slow down and break it. And one thing that I say to students is it's okay to not know this at first. It's okay to struggle.
Hmm.
And I think if they can hear from their parents, you're supposed to be struggling. It's not
Yes.
supposed to be easy. And you know how some students like they go through up through like freshman year and everything's easy, and then sophomore year it hits and suddenly
Hmm.
things are difficult. To hear that it's okay to be difficult, it's
Yes. Yes.
okay to struggle, I think helps. What are some of the things that students can do when they hear this from their parents and they say, okay, this is a skill, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to try? What can they do at that point
In terms of studying, yes?
in terms of studying
In terms of
and
studying.
applying themselves?
Absolutely. I think one thing that's very helpful for students when they're studying for the ACT or really any math test is to track their mistakes, especially for students with math anxiety. And it's almost weird because you think if you're focusing on your mistakes, it might hurt their confidence. But one of the benefits of tracking mistakes is that they see all the questions that they're getting right, and if they can really see those questions, the ones that they're consistently getting right, then that helps to reduce their anxiety on those questions during the exam, right? Because it takes away a little bit of that fear. They know that they can get those right. And then you can focus your studying on the ones that they're getting wrong. And then on the test too, right? They know where to check for mistakes, because something that's very stressful for students with math anxiety is we tell them always check your work, but they're like, what if I make a mistake checking my work and I mess up on a question that I got right? And that just frazzles them even more. But instead, if they can have a specific list and then they know these questions I'm good, I can be confident there. These questions I tend to make mistakes. And if you can even track what type of mistakes, order of operations, right? Exponent rules, there's certain things that come up over and over again. And if you have a list of those, then they know exactly a specific things to check for when they're going back and checking their work. And that actually can help their confidence too with those questions that they struggle with, because now they know which ones to come back and look for.
So a student has a mental list of everything that they're strong in, that they can be confident in, and then they've
Mm-hmm.
got a physical list of the things that they need to focus on. So when
Mm-hmm.
they see those questions, they know, well, ideally, by the time they get to the test, they will have studied for those.
Mm-hmm. But
Um,
we know that we often go into the tests in imperfect situations, right?
right.
Where we're not always getting 100%, on all of the questions leading into the test. So those are the ones that are good to know. If there's ones that we're going to miss, which ones are they, to know ahead of time?
That makes so much sense. And I work with students, and sometimes we identify for them, all right, here's something, exponent rules. You can learn that in 1 minute, write it down, study it, you will remember it.
Mm-hmm.
Other things like factoring quadratic equations, you should know how to do that. But there's one question, in fact, it's only question 23 on one of the math problems. And you need to just recognize the greatest common factor of two base variables with exponents. And I always ask the students, okay, the directions say, or the explanation says, first, the student should recognize that blah, blah, blah is the greatest common factor of this. And I said, do you recognize that? And they're like, no. Like, okay, you may put that on your list of things that you're just going to pick letter of the day and move on. Have a strategy for the things that are quicker and easier to review and to learn, and know what you're not going to learn this time. Maybe if you take the ACT or the SAT a second time, that's
Mm-hmm.
on your list of things to take some extra time to go back and learn. But no need to go back and just learn all of algebra again.
Yes, yes. And even with that too, right? If you think about the fact that, there's some things on the ACT and the SAT that they come up once, right? Or they come up once every like 5 exams. And those things, you need to know those if you're going for a perfect score,
Right.
right? But you don't necessarily need to know them if you're going for like a good score. That can be one of those things that maybe you don't worry about. And when you're tracking your mistakes, you'll see that maybe came up once on one test, but there might be a different type of mistake that came up on every single test. And you know for sure if that came up 6 times on your list, that's the thing that you really want to study.
Well, aiming in this little series at really giving some real hard information, do you know off the top of your head some of the things that always do come up, like a list of things that like every student should study for the ACT or SAT?
For the ACT, oh gosh, you know what? You're more the expert on that than I am. It's been years. I tutored SAT and ACT prep for Kaplan test prep, and I trained their tutors, but it was well over 10 years ago, and I'm sure it's evolved since then. Um,
I
I'm
know
trying to think.
a common word problem is somebody works some overtime hours.
Mm-hmm.
And so you need to figure out how much money they make for their 40-hour week. They'll tell you how much the normal week is. Then they'll say
Mm-hmm.
like, well, they worked 8 hours or they worked 48 hours total. So
Right,
one, you've
right.
got to figure out how much they make for their normal week. Then they say, okay, that's time and a half. So you have to be able to know what's 1.5 times of something.
Right, right.
And then you just keep on adding it up. That's something that shows up a lot. And have you
Oh
noticed
yeah.
that word problems are typically pretty easy math? It's just a whole big bunch of steps.
That's what I was just going to say is word problems are so hard, right? Because it's got the math in it that you have to know. Plus it has the whole translating factor. Plus oftentimes there's always that sneak at the very end of the question where you might have to do one extra step. And if you forget to go back and check that you answered the question correctly, then you could have done like 90% of the work correctly and still miss it. So I know word problems, especially, the harder ones, are very, very sneaky. Yeah.
How do you, is there a way other than just working with specific word problems and working through it to teach students to, the way I put it is convert words to math? Like, is there
Um,
a special strategic way to do that?
well, I mean, there's certain words, there's certain keywords to look for. So the way that I tend to do it with students, and a lot of this is sort of going back to my college algebra class, is that, we tend to circle keywords, and use those to translate. So it ends up sort of looking sort of funny. You'll have like a number and then a keyword circled and another number and another keyword, because, adding or product or is always means equal, stuff like that. Um, so I tend to break things down that way. But yes, it is a skill that, requires a lot of practice. So I think the main thing that I would say is just to practice. And if it's specifically for the ACT, then make sure you're specifically practicing ACT type word problems. And just sort of like with your regular math class, that repeated practice does really help. And yeah, there's no real shortcut, I think, with the word problems, unfortunately.
But I think that's helpful if a parent is helping their child with a word problem, or if their child is saying, "Oh, I don't even know where to start," and the parent's kind of, "I don't know where to start either." The
Hmm.
parent will probably be able to quickly recognize, like if it says a tank is 200 gallons and it loses, circle that word loses. That means you start with 200 and
Hmm.
then you're subtracting something.
Right, right.
So
Yeah.
that just that little tip of circling keywords.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And for students who have math anxiety, and if that tends to kick in during those word problems, I'd say my suggestion is start off by reading the word problem and circling keywords and then translating whatever you can, right? And remember, you don't have to do the whole problem all at once. So if that's as far as you get, just stop, move on to the next question. And then later, when you come back to that question, you've already done part of the work. And it's a little bit easier to pick up at that point. So sometimes breaking those word problems up into multiple steps can sort of help to reduce that anxiety.
Somewhere along the way, I came up with the strategy of asking yourself, well, what do I know? And it's
Yeah.
basically what you
Yes,
just said.
yes. Uh-huh.
That's
I
the
love
same
that.
thing you just said, is ask yourself, well, what do I know? Well, I do know that she made $14 an hour for 40 hours. So let me go ahead and write that one down.
Yes, yes.
And
Uh-huh.
then just keep going. And a lot of times when you break it down like that, it takes you to where you need to go.
Mm-hmm.
Do you
Absolutely.
have any maybe just mindset advice on sitting down and taking that test? Because the standardized test, one thing that's different about it is in school, your whole entire year is algebra and you're only focused on algebra. But when you take the ACT, you've got algebra, you've got number sense, then you switch
Yes.
to a geometry question, then you switch back to, something else,
I
a
know. It's
percentage
so
question.
random. I know.
How can students deal with that?
Um, well, most of that's going to come with preparation, right? There's only so much that you can do in the actual exam. So if you didn't prepare for, say, geometry and you haven't seen it for 2 years, there maybe isn't a lot that you can do if you don't actually, remember the equation or the distance formula, whatever it is. Um, as far as I'm trying to think, mindset things for going into the exam. I think what I've ended up doing with a couple of students who had severe math anxiety was we actually set up a pre-test routine, and we sort of started this with our practice tests. But we would pick out a couple of problems that they had practiced, and they were sort of easy or medium problems that they know that they could get right, and I'd have them do those the morning of the test. And that just sort of helps them to sort of build their confidence a little bit. And remember, there are ACT questions that you can get right. And just to know, you go into the test and you look for those ones that you can get right. And so that seemed to make a really big difference, because one of the things that we don't want to happen with students with math anxiety is for them to panic and blank out on those questions that we know they can get right, right? That's sort of like the worst case scenario. So doing that warm up, that little warm up test during breakfast can really help. And avoiding the really hard questions. The last thing you want to do the night before or the morning of the test is to review the really hard questions, because that'll just mess with your head and amp up that anxiety even more. Um, and then I've had a couple of students who have really found that meditation has helped, and that journaling about their anxiety has helped. And so for both of these, I know the journaling one, there was a study that they did on students, I think it was in science classes, but I found that it really helps in math classes, and that if they journaled about their anxiety before their exams, it helped to reduce it, right? Because it's acknowledging it, it's, you know, taking a moment to think about it, and just in doing so and writing it down, it helps to sort of just make it dissipate. Um, and
I read that. Yeah.
I've done this in my math class. You know, I've taught a couple remedial math classes with students who, like, across the board, everybody had severe math anxiety, and it really helped a lot of the students. So it might seem sort of cheesy, but that's something that really helps. And if you have a child who you find that meditation helps their anxiety just in general, absolutely pull that into your pre-test routine, and have them meditate a bit beforehand.
Yes, and the kids know about this app called Headspace. Have your
Yes, that's what I
Yeah.
use. I love Headspace. Yes. Uh-huh.
Yes, and it guides them through and helps them know, how to meditate. But the
Yep.
the writing will end on that note. I read that study as well, and I had my students do it. And one of the things that they said was, "Wait, this doesn't make any sense. Isn't this gonna make me more nervous
I
because it's
know.
gonna force
That's
me
what you
to
would think,
think
huh?
about it, right?" And I said, "Actually, think of it like you're taking it out of your head,
Mhm.
you're putting it on the paper, and
Yes.
then you're done with it." Like, you can, once do you ever, like, if you're upset, if you hold it in, you feel worse. But if you share it with somebody, maybe you feel worse for a minute while you have to say it and you cry, but then you're done.
Mhm.
So
Yep.
they on their own added something to the exercise. They crumpled it up in a ball and threw it away
Oh, that's fantastic.
once
I
they
love
were
that so much.
once they were done getting it out of their system. Yeah.
That is perfect. I love that as an ending to that exercise.
Yeah, it was wonderful. Well, you have helped us, Allison, with so many specific tips, and I like
Oh, thank
that
you.
that students can do, that parents can help their kids. And to recap, the most important thing that I feel like you said today was that math is a skill. It can be learned. And there's really, I mean, some people may have an aptitude for math, but there's no such thing as you can't do math. In fact, I've heard math teachers all along say they hate it when people say, "I hate math, I can't do math." Nobody gets to say, "I hate, like, I can't read or I can't
I
speak,"
know, I know.
right?
Yes.
Even if you don't know
Mhm.
all the grammar rules, you still speak, you still do your best,
Yes. And
and you
reading
still
and reading was
communicate,
not easy at the beginning, right? At the
right?
beginning, it was hard and it was frustrating, and you had to work through it to get to the point where you could just read automatically, you know? Yeah.
Exactly.
The
So we
same.
we we do math, and we do it every day. So everybody, just be that cheerleader for your child and let them know what they can do. And if the homework seems impossible, maybe ask them, "Well, when did you like math? What can you do?" And like you said, practice some of the things that they're strong at, and then pull that thinking into the harder items.
Absolutely. Cool.
So if you want to learn more, Allison has a whole parenting membership to help support parents. Go on over to, as you see behind her, AllisonLovesMath.com, and you can find her books and all the information about her parenting membership. And I'm sure you can find out how to watch her upcoming podcast.
Absolutely. Thank you so much
All
for
right.
having me, Laura. This was
Thank
so
you
fun.
so much. It's been wonderful. And anybody wants to learn more about me, in the comments or in my profile on the social media where you see this, you will see a way to join my mailing list. And that's the best way to just find out all of these new little tidbits and pieces of information to help you. Bye, everybody.